Hi, everyone. Welcome to the November 2021 Becky's Anonymous live stream. This month, we are having a conversation about land back, climate justice, and why we need land rematriation now. We had Olivia Moore joining us this evening. Unfortunately, Olivia is not able to be here, but she sent some great words and a great video that we are going to share with you tonight. And we really look forward to seeing you all Wednesday at noon or 7 for our growth circle. First, to share a little bit of who Olivia Moore is, so you can check out Olivia Moore's work and all the great organizations that she's working with. Olivia Moore of the Penobscot Nation is a two-spirit community organizer committed to restoring traditional methods of healing through balanced relationship with the earth. They work to restore Wabanaki cultural lifeways as a path to heal our tribal kinship systems. She organizes the Wabanaki Two-Spirit Alliance in what is now Maine as a co-founder and builder of Eastern Woodlands Rematriation Collective. They support the revitalization of Indigenous foods and healing systems. Alivia is immersed in tribal and state child welfare system reform and fosters Native children. She serves as the co-chair for the Maine Wabanaki Reach, supporting the decolonization processes in both Wabanaki and non-tribal communities in Maine. You can check out this great work at the Eastern Woodlands Rematriation Collective, Maine Wabanaki Reach, and the Wabanaki Two-Spirit Alliance. Check out our website for more information on how to get connected with that work. We'd like to start this conversation with this quote from the Sogoreate Land Trust Rematriation Resource Guide, which again, we'll be sharing online at our website, so you can check out all the great resources that have come out of this great movement. And they share with us this definition of rematriate. Rematriate, to restore sacred relationships between Indigenous people and their ancestral land, honoring our matrilineal societies and lineages' ways of tending to the land, in opposition of patriarchal violence and dynamics. We will share the video that Olivia sent to us to dive even deeper into rematriation. But before we get to that, just want to highlight our action items, beginning with next week, the National Day of Mourning, which we honor in Becky's Anonymous every year. We will have great resources on our website of how you can participate either in person in Plymouth or virtually to honor the National Day of Mourning on November 25th, 2021 at noon. Again, we'll be sharing resource guides from the Sogoreate Land Trust, as well as the NDN Collective. And again, you can check that out on our website. And also we're profiling two direct political actions, joining the Climate Justice Alliance in our power campaign, as well standing with Honor the Earth and telling President Biden to stop Line 3. And again, check out our website for more information on both of those actions. So now we'd like to share the video that Olivia sent us. This is a presentation that she did at the Blue Hill Public Library in Blue Hill, Maine. Olivia shares that she wants to make sure that we're understanding the distinction and interplay between white supremacy and settler colonialism. Wednesday, we'll be discussing how white women can act for racial justice and anti-colonialism. And again, how the Indigenous experience of settler colonialism needs to be better centered in any talks of justice in the so-called US. And so I'll now share the video, Olivia's presentation on the Wabanaki rematriation and land justice. And we look forward to seeing you all Wednesday in our growth circle at noon and 7. Thank you all for sharing this time tonight.
Okay, So this was going to be, I was hoping that there would be time and space for others to be able to do a little introduction of themselves so we could kind of know who was in the room. So I, for myself, would like to start our time together just by beginning by acknowledging some of my many teachers. So I'd like to first acknowledge my, see, I see a little fly right by the camera there. So my ancestors who loved, resisted, and built a beautiful legacy to guide our work today. I also want to acknowledge my more than human teachers, and for me especially, that's the Penobscot, the Penobscot River, water generally, plants and trees have been important teachers for me. My family really broadly, parents, sisters, cousins, nieces and nephews, my partner Sai. Of the many who have shaped my thinking and my work, I really want to raise up Esther Ann, Denise Altbader, Cynthia Burns, who have been connected to me through my entire life and continue our relationship and work through Maine Wabanaki Reach. I also want to acknowledge Tuma Young and John Sillyboy, who are both Mi'kmaq Two Spirit community organizers, leaders, teachers, and organize the Wabanaki Two Spirit Alliance. Also Nia Hawley and Kristen Wyman, who are the co-founders with me of Eastern Woodland Rematriation, and how much it has been supportive of my growth and my work for my community, and acknowledging my greatest teacher of all within my life is my daughter, Danica. So I want to just say that I'm really happy to be here with you all in Zoom land this evening, Zoom land being on Indigenous land everywhere, we're all on Indigenous land. And I'm really excited to, let me see, I should go ahead, yep. To share with you from my lens as a Penobscot person, as a queer two-spirit person, my understandings of rematriation and land justice in Wabanaki. And so Wabanaki being the land of the first light, of the dawn land, part of that territory being what is now referred to as Maine, but our territory extending beyond in maritime Canadian provinces, our territory also in New Hampshire, Vermont, what is now New Hampshire, Vermont. And because our time together is fairly limited, I'm going to be talking mostly about values and framework of rematriation, and I'm not going to be able to fully delve into the beautiful work of Eastern Woodlands Rematriation. Certainly will touch on it. It's really integral. And I'll need to transition promptly at 5 because of my caregiving honors and responsibilities, and so I'll need to pick up my daughter. If there's the energy within participants for questions, I'll be happy to swap over to a phone that I can use hand-free, and so I'd have about 15 minutes to answer questions in transit if that is what folks would like to do. I apologize that I'm going to be moving quickly. And I'm not able to see the chat to get feedback. Let me see if there's a way.
I can definitely monitor the chat and kind of shout out questions as they come up if you want, Olivia.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can see it too, so much the better. But
yeah, I'm not sure how to do that. So, okay, great. I'm glad knowing that Hannah will be able to kind of let me know, and I'll just switch back. Um, so, so while Wabanaki resistance, has been persistent and successful, like we're still here. We have survived centuries of totally encompassing genocidal strategies. There is no blueprint for what Wabanaki people are undertaking to restore our relationships to the earth in the current context, right? There's no blueprint for how Wabanaki, Black, Brown, relatives and settlers are undertaking this journey of rematriation together. So I'm not going to be providing a convenient how to achieve land justice rematriation. This will be an invitation to step into the necessary, the messy, the urgent process of building relationships and doing this work together. So a little bit about Eastern Woodlands Repatriation. Um, our work is we're boldly reclaiming the right to food and relationship to the earth for Indigenous peoples. We initiate and help sustain existing community-led food and medicine projects across tribal communities in the Northeast. So extending beyond and outside of Wabanaki communities as well. Eastern Woodlands Repatriation prioritizes collective leadership and is led entirely by Indigenous women and Two Spirits. From our initial formation, we intentionally decentralized power to raise up folks as experts within their respective communities. Our collective decision-making, community organizing, and collective cultivation practices aligned with matriarchal principles of earth-centered stewardship. We are restoring polycultural food systems and local fisheries, restoring transmission of traditional medicine and foodways while re-engaging spiritual foundations of our livelihoods. We embrace agroecology, which you can see one of the publications we recently supported the development of and were highlighted within. So we embrace agroecology and anti-oppression and anti-violence frameworks as a pathway to food sovereignty and to the rebuilding of Indigenous agroecologies, agroeconomies, excuse me. So bold vision and a really broad vision, and that's exactly what I feel like we are doing and undertaking. And so in thinking about the work of rematriation, for Eastern Woodlands Rematriation, we focus on rematriate as a verb, emphasizing the process of restoring our spiritual foundations and relationships with our Indigenous food systems. We see our food systems as a pathway to becoming rooted in the earth again, and it's an avenue for transforming society. Our entire existence as Wabanaki people shift kind of more from the perspective. And I apologize, this wasn't included in an introduction. It was in a written portion of introduction of who I am, but I feel like it is important to say. So I said I'm speaking as a Penobscot person, Penobscot tribal member. It's the community and culture that I have been raised within and organizing in. So again, that's how I situate myself in speaking for my own perspective, and not even for all folks in Eastern Woodlands Rematriation or even all Penobscot people. But again, from my understanding, so our entire existence as Wabanaki, as Penobscot people, was historically constructed in deep reciprocal relationship with the earth. Our social structure was rooted in the earth, our spiritual and political life and balanced relationship with the cosmos. Prior to colonization, our societies were more balanced. A lot of the ways that we were organized and the values that we held shaped how we created society. And our political structures were organized through a system of matriarchy. So Wabanaki political structure being matriarchy, and so there's matriarchal society, and then there's like matrilineal, which is more of a focus on how relationships, but also property are passed down. So we were both traditionally matriarchal as a political entity, and also matrilineal in how we related to, yeah, kind of like the clan, and also how any sort of, even though property accumulation was a much different kind of concept within matriarchy, and we'll talk some about that. So again, Wabanaki matriarchies were clan systems led by grandmothers who were the main sources of guidance. Together, clan matriarchs selected the chief, who was seen as a spokesperson rather than a unilateral decision maker. And so matriarchy was balanced. There we did have war chiefs, but it was also the grandmother's council, who essentially had the right to veto a decision of war chiefs to go to war. So as some of that example. And so Wabanaki worldview through matriarchal framework was that our traditional understandings of how we related to the earth, to what now are referred to as resources, but as Indigenous people there are relatives, and again we'll talk more about this, but the ways that we related to in our relationships with humans and more than humans, which includes the earth. We understood both the flexibility of systems, the need to be responsive and fluid, and as recognizing things in cycles, life cycles and seasons. And so that movement, but also within that movement, there's important pieces of predictability. So again, relating to the world and understanding the world as both predictable and flexible. So matriarchies were Indigenous law that was developed in reflection of and humbling ourselves to the laws of nature. So essentially submitting ourselves to natural law and developing our human laws of matriarchy and how we organized ourselves to both reflect and submit to humble ourselves underneath the limits that that natural law provided for us. And I think there's also some really important lessons around our understanding of the world, and relating really deeply in ways that were both predictable and flexible. That again are just really elements that I continually think about as we do our work now, and how we embody that and how we think about those same values and translate them to our current situations and contexts and needs in our communities now. Wabanaki languages were generally not gendered. So rather than he and she, it was our language tended to be they, that something was alive, that something was living within a matriarchal framework, each being, and so being a being, human, but beings also being plants, rocks, water, animals, fish, insects, etc. So each being has a gift, has a purpose, and has a role. Another important element within matriarchal frameworks is that we understood. So for me, there's really important elements around gender, around gender roles, and gender in a way that was not prescripted, that there was great variance in what it looked like to be a Penobscot man and how they served and contributed to community. There was great variance in what it looked like to be a Penobscot woman and to contribute to community, and also great variance in what it meant to be what now might be referred to as a two-spirit person, and how we contributed to community, but that we were all necessary and needed to be fully embodying ourselves and contributing to the wholeness of community, and that our community could not be whole without each of us bringing our gifts and our full selves to community and serving our people. And also I shared this really important lesson of, hearing that traditionally children, that children told us who they were, and we as a community accommodated. And that statement was shared in a context of talking about gender and sexuality, but but that encompassed all parts of their being. So versus a culture now within settler colonial patriarchy, where we're in a culture of these pre-birth gender reveal parties, and so really like intervening, and so this would have been seen taboo in traditional Wabanaki or Penobscot societies, taboo to intervene in the purpose and gift that each being has, and sort of I mean completely, you know, predetermining determining that. So when we're talking about matriarchies, we're not talking about flipping patriarchy. We're not talking about flipping it so that the power just becomes in different hands. When we're talking about matriarchy or rematriating, we're valuing nurturing and regeneration. We're centering nurturing and regeneration in all decision making and all activities, say within the work of the collective. So when we talk about regeneration, yes, absolutely, we're including children and child rearing and the raising of our little ones. But regeneration, if when you think more broadly, when you're embedded in your cosmos, regeneration includes our traditional land management strategies. So burning, traditional burning methods of management of the land, as counterintuitive as that can be to some, that actually done in a way that is in deep relationship and understanding the boundaries and understanding that space, right? Like burning land as a traditional land management strategy is absolutely supportive of regeneration. So all decision making really being centered on regeneration. It was so to rematriate is also nurturing the power and the gifts that we each innately value. Excuse me, nurturing the power and gifts that we each innately carry. And so value is extended to all our relatives, understanding that there's a power and a gift in all of our relatives, human and non-human. Decisions within a matriarchy were also guided by the questions: does this nurture, does this support regeneration, and how does this care for future relatives? And again, our relatives were defined more than just our human relatives. They were very broadly defined. And so again, asking that question, how does this nurture our future generations of relatives, thinking beyond just our nuclear family or human relatives. So matriarchy is a different worldview and framework from the one we're existing within, from patriarchy. It's much more balanced, and it's about nurturing the power within, whereas patriarchy is a way of living and relating that is fostering power over. So innate power within, that power is a beautiful thing. It is self-actualizing and it's in service of others. In this way, power becomes beautiful and transformative. I don't know if I'm going to have time. I'm going to move a little bit more quickly, but one of the key pieces of that we're really intentional about within Eastern Woodlands Rematriation, within like how we undertake our work of restoring our Indigenous food and healing systems, is really nurturing the broad development of our kin networks and these like broad networks of reciprocity and exchange, and really truly deeply embodying this deeper way of relating and identifying like who is family. And when you identify a really broad understanding of who of your human relatives are your family and who of your more than human relatives, right? Again, the water, the soil, the deer. When you see and understand them as family, you also recognize you have a responsibility to them. So within the collective, really like pushing those questions of like, are we relating as family and in ways where we're deeply responsible to one another? And just think of how transformative that could be if we could shift our understanding of like how we structure families, from when it comes down to it, when things get really tough, like, like, and we got to put our heads down to take care of our family. Like, who's in that circle? And again, from a patriarchal and a hetero patriarchal framework, that's a very limited scope of like who you are responsible to. And when you have a much more expansive understanding of who you are responsible to, but who you are deeply embedded with, it that also is incredibly transformative. Ooh, time moves so quickly. So I guess
And we're still seeing that same first slide, Olivia. I'm not sure if you
oh geez, yeah,
advanced through those.
that sounds just like me. Yeah, so I'm gonna try to. I love seeing our kids. Okay, thank you for that. So just gonna speak really super briefly about colonization and impact on our matriarchies, on our communities, and some about our land relationship to land. Yeah, so I think a lot of us are coming to not enough, but more of us are coming to acknowledge the reality of colonization here in what is now referred to as the United States. Um, that it was this process that that it occurred. Right, there's been so much invisibility about that even being a reality, that it occurred. But in thinking about our matriarchal structures, so colonization was really intentional about targeting our political structures, which were matriarchal. So targeting our healers, our leaders, our knowledge keepers, and these patterns of attacking our women and our two spirit and our femme community members with a level of violence and invisibility continues to this day, right? And there's a whole movement around missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two spirits. And so that reflection of these historical patterns of harm to those who in our communities were leaders and decision makers, they, as a process of colonization, right, intentionally attacking our systems of knowing, attacking our processes of transmitting knowledge, and undoing our systems of order and our systems of family politics and how we sustained ourselves with the earth, on the earth. So erasure of our healers and leaders. And that was a really intentional strategy and tactic, and one that in different ways continues today. We also understand that colonization, genocide, that was removing us as Indigenous people from our land base, which is not only the foundation of our spirituality, but of our social, political, and economic structures. So this ecocide, which continues to this day, included targeting keystone species. And so a lot of how that was done here in the Northeast was the damming of our rivers, which the work that Kristen Wyman has, she is a Nipmuc and one of the co-founders of Eastern Woodlands Rematriation, dear relative, as we undertake this work together, is highlighted for her Nipmuc people, damming the rivers in their territory in what's now Massachusetts. But as we should know, here in Wabanakik in Maine, also very much a continued struggle of damming our rivers and pollution of our rivers, and limiting our ability to sustain ourselves or to access our rivers. And so through colonization, the process of our traditional healing methods needed to either go underground or to be held by our relatives that moved out to the Great Lakes region. And so I'm thinking about how this really impacted our two-spirit people and relatives, and two-spirit healers, And that's why there's so much work that needs to be done. And like any talk, I will always include and highlight and put a disproportionate amount of energy into the remembering and the reliving and reclaiming as a two-spirit Penobscot person, because it is needed, because there's been a disproportionate amount of invisibility to our existence. And so, of course, our people became and in ways have remained ill. And the structure of our community is totally upended, but really and so, so a result of this is that gender for men, women, two-spirit people, especially, all gender diverse Indigenous identities, have been targeted by colonization. And so a form of gender-based genocide continues to this day. Um, so and so as we should know now, land for Indigenous people has been the basis of our survival, a reflection of our selves and our cultures and community developed in deep reflection of the specific piece of the earth that we are in relationship and responsibility to. And so how colonization and sequestration from our land and land base impacts our ability to survive. And so now currently within our settler colonial reality and the reality of capitalism, land is the source of all wealth. Land itself is an asset, and even with I don't know if it's just COVID, but all of the array of climate crisis and political crisis and global um, politics, and also COVID and impacts on the economy. I mean, I know in Maine we're seeing like a tremendous um, influx of folks, like purchasing more land here, and really feeling like, people are making lots of choices around how they think that they can make themselves more stable or supported in this reality. And people are really seeing land as like a foundational source of stability for whatever may come. And so again, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other kind of talk about really that kind of level of relationship to land. But again, removal from our lands was primary and continues to be a primary tool of genocide and colonization. And so that continues to this day, and all forms of security, whether it's perceived security or actual security, really comes down to relationship to the land, even within this settler colonial patriarchal reality, but also in if we were to reclaim a framework of matriarchy, our true security and well-being also is rooted in relationship with the earth. Um, okay, I'm gonna have to skip over some other elements here, but I just want to name that the climate change and the environmental disasters that that we're living, and those which are continuing to grow due to human extraction, exploitation, and colonialism, those that are the most impacted are the closest to the problem. And so, and those are the Indigenous, Black and Brown folks. We can most clearly see the tactics of that oppression and harm. So it's Indigenous, Black and Brown folks that really must lead land, environmental, climate justice work if we're going to expect it to be effective. It's really important that I'm not saying it is only our responsibility to bear this burden, but we need to be centered, and there's really important leadership that could be deeply transformative for pushing back against these structures of harm. And so, again, thinking about the work of Eastern Woodlands Rematriation in our own piece of the puzzle through food and healing systems, really working to undertake that. So, so in restoring, we are working to restore traditional relationships with the earth, with ceremony, language, foodways, political processes, and economic systems. We are working really hard to continue the work of our ancestors. And within all of that, elevating rematriation and matriarchy within our food sovereignty and our political organizing work. One of the really key, beautiful pieces of our work is that Eastern Woodlands Rematriation, we're not a program, we're not an organization, we don't provide services to any community. We really see ourselves as a movement, as a coordination space, as a space to come together and to support building the capacity of the natural movers and shakers and builders within our tribal communities. But we're not sort of like developing a model and then, hey, bring it to these other Indigenous communities. We're working to support the leadership and centering what the needs and the solutions are that are existing within communities. So we're working really hard to build deep, meaningful relationships across Indigenous communities throughout what's now the Northeast United States. So basically restoring, like traditionally we had incredibly strong social relationships. We, social, and again, it's all so interconnected. Social relationships, we had really strong economic trade routes amongst our tribal communities throughout what's now the United States, Turtle Island, but really close, deep, regular systems here in the Northeast. And so we're really intentional in re-engaging in exchange and trade and what we're able to cultivate and grow or harvest and have access to in Penobscot territory. It could be different than what they have access to or deep relationship with in Wampanoag community. And so trading, and so restoring those traditional trade routes, but also social and hopefully political relationships amongst our communities as well. It's really central to us that we are working to restore communalism, to embody cooperation, and all of our work is centered around mutual aid. So again, in making this transformation away from settler colonial patriarchy, and preparing for what comes next after capitalism, as we rebuild our matriarchies, communalism, and again, turning away from individuation and really like thinking about what those relational elements are as here's some of our incredible food producers, Kessie Waters and her husband, she's Mi'kmaq. Um, so yeah, sorry. So yes, so really thinking about what does that translate to for the the food projects that we're supporting, and how we're undertaking those food projects. And so Kessie up here, incredible new Mi'kmaq farmer, and absolutely so proud of her, an incredible collective member, and just so generous and beautiful with all of her love and her labor and her commitment to community. And so within the collective, we absolutely support individual farmers or aspiring Indigenous farmers, but we want to be really, like, we are being really intentional in naming and saying that our ideal is not to, you know, shift the number of farms from white, you know, farm holders to it being Indigenous farm holders, because that, you know, farming agriculture is a piece of, this is my baby, you know, a piece of restoring Indigenous food systems is agriculture, but especially here in the Northeast, agriculture was not a significant um, part of our food system the way that it was and is for other Indigenous folks in the United States. And we want to be really careful that we're acknowledging that farming has been a really like frontline tool of colonization, not only in the literal colonization and the taking of our land, and like on the front line of the slaughter and the clearing of our traditional food forests, but also it was a tool and a strategy used by the US government to try to turn Native people into farmers and to shift our way of relating and to have us be more sedentary and to relate to food production and the earth and the economy in a way that was not only familiar but was useful and extractive in plugging us into capitalism. So our goal is absolutely not to support, you know, like, is not a central goal of ours to support Indigenous folks becoming farmers in a traditional sense. Or, excuse me, traditional, maybe in a modern sense. What we are working towards is collective cultivation and even embodying those in farms like Kessie's, where Kessie is doing incredible work with her extended family, really engaged in the work that they're doing there, but also across our food projects that we're engaging in mutual aid. And COVID has added this whole other element of real challenge to, you know, what it means to cultivate collectively when we're living in individual homes and communities. So there's a lot of pieces that we're working to navigate as we're undertaking this. So again, within Eastern Woodlands Rematriation, so not only working to really strengthen our collective cultivation processes within our local Wabanaki communities or across the region with Indigenous people throughout the Northeast. We're also, you know, building with global processes of food sovereignty, building political power, building power, political will, and mobilizing resistance within our tribal people and undertaking political education with our tribal people around this, and also again plugging into those global movements, including developing relationships with Olivia Campesina, the MST Landless Workers Movement of Brazil. We are very active members of U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance and the People's Agroecology Process, developing relationships with Indigenous Environmental Network, among others. And so again, really seeing that collectivity and solidarity, if we are going to transform our realities the way that they need to, it requires that we are building deep solidarity globally. So really quickly, some of the current work of Eastern Woodlands Rematriation does include, again, supporting Indigenous food and medicine producers. We have our, let's skip right past it, our Wabanaki Community Herbal Apothecary, and within that, a Wabanaki herbalism apprenticeship, which we're in our second year of undertaking. And so that has become a really beautiful point where allies and accomplices can support the apothecary by either growing medicines specifically for the apothecary that is shared out with our traditional medicine keepers. So growing medicines or donating live plants. And usually this is in relationship. So we're having conversations about what are some of the priorities or some of the needs within our tribal communities. And that's been a really beautiful project. And a lot of our queer community, our non-Indigenous queer community relatives have like stepped up in that way to grow and to donate some really beautiful, powerful medicines for us to share in community. Let's see. And it's also been a point of exchange throughout the collective as well. So those medicines are shared throughout the collective. We're also undertaking work of rightful return of Wabanaki land. And so this is connected to Eastern Woodlands Rematriation's Wabanaki land rematriation group. And there's like a number of really beautiful land return or land access projects going on in what is now Maine or Wabanaki that I'm sure folks, a number of folks have seen some of the media around the recent 735 acre parcel that was returned to Penobscot Nation, our tribal government. And that was absolutely like necessary, and that is a really beautiful beginning to this work that needs to be undertaken with the work of Wabanaki Land Rematriation Work Group. Land return is a part of that work, and we have a commitment, one specific commitment of land return. As soon as we figure out what kind of legal status, we were really sure that we were going to develop an Indigenous community land trust so that we could hold the land. And there's ongoing kind of new pieces that kind of come up that we need to reflect on the situation and think about what really frees us the most from these colonial processes of land holding. Like what really gives us the most space to, one, reclaim relationship with land and our territory in a way that can prepare us for what comes after these colonial structures are not here. So I think we still have some decision making to do around that. But yeah, having individual landowners in really like patient, beautiful ways, like making those very solid, specific commitments and also waiting for us, and that like patience and holding that ambiguity as we organize as Indigenous people and really take the time to reflect on what are the values that we want to undertake this work, and then what are the strategies that support those values. And so that's been really beautiful. And so again, I think it's really important. So, this hashtag land back is becoming more visible in popular culture. Just as decolonization as a concept has become much more popular and mainstream, and just as people are pushing back that decolonization is not a metaphor, it's going to be really important that as we continue this work across our communities, that we recognize that land back is not a metaphor either. That land back is land back. And so another piece is the development of a rematriation school, which is something for the collective Eastern Woodlands Rematriation that we knew was an eventual goal, and we knew that it was going to be really central to this intergenerational work of rematriating. But with COVID and kids being home or schools not being safe or virtual learning, like all of these pieces being, our whole reality is being upended. We're like, this is a time, this thing that we know is necessary. And we know that education has been a very explicit tool of genocide and continues to be a way that we are invisibilized and harmed. like this is a way that we need to reclaim this space of how we teach, how we transmit knowledge and values and collectivity with our young ones. So right now we're in the process of working to secure some funds so that we can do the organizing work for the piloting of a rematriation school, which is not going to be a physical place at this point. Um, but yeah, really excited about that because children, our children are involved in all aspects of our work, right? So when we are out, cultivating, when we are out gathering, when we are making medicines or preserving foods at home or butchering or smoking fish, like our children are with us. And right now with the pace of things, like we're it's not necessarily, we're not able to intentionally engage our children the ways that they really need to be, to really fully engage them in the learning, but also the responsibilities of the work. And right now it's like, come on kids, like here we go, like we've got a lot of like really important, like urgent, like our communities need this food, they need this nourishment, they need these connections to the earth again. But with a rematriation school, so basically mirroring the work that the collective is already doing around wild rice restoration, around our traditional medicines, and having units and the and kits for our youth to engage at their level with the work that we're doing, really centering and so really, yeah, and really engaging them as leaders and teachers also, so giving them space. And within the Rematriation School, we're focusing on families as students, and so not just the children, but recognizing that rematriation is learning, growing, and healing that we all need to do. And so rematriating entails decolonizing our parenting and restoring engagement with community models of education. So again, this is not just like a holding space for children, but so within the Rematriation School also be um, doing work around education that is specifically targeted towards decolonizing parenting, and all of what that looks like. Um, don't have time to share in tremendous depth there. So just in kind of wrapping up, what I really want to impress is that all of the pain and the inequities in access, in outcomes and experiences, the inequities in lives harmed and lost through brutality, rape, um, the environmental collapse that we're experiencing right now, all of these are signs that our systems are functioning exactly as they were intended to within settler colonial capitalism, right? So, 98% of agricultural land is in white ownership. That is a symptom of a fully functioning white supremacist settler colonial empire. This is exactly what was supposed to happen. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. And the piece of the reality that was not planned for was the degree of Black and Indigenous resistance. We have resisted complete extermination. We have resisted total subjugation. Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, we know how to fight back against imperialism. So imagine what we collectively could accomplish if white folks could give up power to allow your Indigenous, Black, and Brown relatives to lead. And so what rematriation in Wabanaki looks like, it is supporting the restoration of matriarchies, the political, the economic, and the social systems founded in matriarchal values. Rematriation is acknowledging Wabanaki law as the human law of this land. And again, Wabanaki law has been developed in deep relationship with the land and submitting ourselves to the natural law of this earth, this part of the earth that we have responsibility to. Rematriation is non-Wabanaki folks respecting that you are visitors here, and also knowing that Wabanaki people, in accordance to our traditional law, have responsibilities as your host, that we have a responsibility to make sure that your needs are met here in our territory, that you are all cared for as our relatives. And so that's where I will end. There's some beautiful pictures, there's some beautiful people. This is Wabanaki Two-Spirit Alliance leading Bangor Pride Parade for the second year. This was the first year, and then we also led in 2019, and then there was just a virtual parade this last year. I love this image from our Two-Spirit gathering. Some of our Wabanaki herbalism apprentices by the Penobscot River. Yeah, okay. So I will chat out, see if I can get back.
I think I can, yeah, if you stop your screen share.
Oh, because you're seeing all the things. Okay.
Yeah. Yay.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Olivia. That was really interesting. And we've had mostly no direct questions so far in the chat, just lots of people expressing their appreciation, which is great. I know you said you offered to potentially do some questions while you're en route. I know you've got to go. Is now a good time to maybe switch? Did you have to switch devices for that?
Yeah.
Great.
Let me.
So we'll take a little sort of breath here, let Olivia switch devices, and if people have questions that they would like addressed, maybe now's a good time to just type them into the chat if you can, and I'll kind of keep tabs on those and I can shout them out once you get